Hello, everyone. This is Cash Miller. I'm the host of Marketing Masters, CEO of Titan Digital. Today, I've got with me Rich Brooks of Flight New Media. It's a digital agency out of Maine. And we're going to be talking about AI and just how it is in general going to affect marketing and also business. Because AI, of course, is, it's been in the news for months and everything, and people are, exploring and experimenting of, how they can, use it to make their jobs easier. We're doing that kind of stuff at our agency, and I know of other businesses that are doing the same thing. There are a lot of pluses to it. There are some negatives. But it's no matter what going to change the landscape. Rich, it's great to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency.
Cash, thank you so much for the opportunity. Like you said, my name is Rich Brooks. I've been running Flight New Media since 1997. So we've been in business for 26 years. Makes me feel much older than I should, for sure. We're a boutique agency up here in Portland. We have 9 to 10 people working for us, and we offer web design, branding, search engine optimization, digital ads, a little bit of social media, more on the consulting side than anything else, and a lot of content creation. But basically, anything that a business or an organization needs to reach and engage more of their audience. And as we were talking before the show, Cash, I also have this other brand called Agents of Change, which is a digital marketing conference and also a podcast as well. And between those two things, it keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, because 1997, that was pretty much the almost, not quite, but almost the dawn of the internet. I said, was it 97 or 98 when Google was founded? Something like, it's right in there. And, so you've seen about every, iteration of the internet that we've had.
It definitely feels that way. And when we were celebrating our 25th anniversary last year, and we were talking about things, that happened back in 1997, there was no Google back in 1997. There was, but we actually beat it. So just the idea that we were older than Google, not quite as successful, perhaps, not as much name recognition, but it is funny to see how much. When I first started, I was designing for screens that were 640 by 480. When you think about how small that is, and designing for dial-up modems, it was just it was a very different time. And I've had to learn, continually adopt to new things that are coming on. First search engine optimization when it first came, then social media, and just all these different things, and finally AI.
Yeah, I always like when I see a site, that I know is really old, and I like to say that's circa 2006. Date the site, based on how it's constructed and such, because occasionally you will still find them, on old Dreamweaver programs and and things like that. So it's just all really old HTML, and of course it's So you've seen, how the internet itself has just totally evolved. Everybody's seen it, if you're of any age, right? If you were born, but before 97 or whatever, so let's call it 1990 and earlier. So you were old enough to use it, but it's different if you're in the business and you've watched it evolve because you were actually paying attention to it.
How things are being made behind the scenes, the way that the skills have evolved over time is really interesting.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. And now, of course, with AI, finally, it's been in the works for a while. It's finally making its appearance, and now it's suddenly, it's AI this and AI that all over the place. So let's start off AI is changing the landscape dramatically, both for marketing and businesses in general. So what do you see happening? You said you were recently at a conference, before the show. Tell us a little bit about that conference and what, kinds of things that they were, telling you.
Right. So you're absolutely right. We've been using AI. It's been in the background for a long time. If you're doing Google ads, if you're doing Facebook ads, you're using machine learning and AI to run those ads. You may not have been touching those things, but they were happening. That's what was making your ads run in the algorithms. But suddenly when ChatGPT basically came out on, I think it was November 30th of last year, it changed everything. And we moved from sitting in the back seat to all of a sudden driving, even if we maybe didn't have our driver's license.
Yeah.
And it did dramatically change, our exposure to AI and us thinking about it. So I went to this conference with some other agency owners. It's called MACON. It's the Marketing AI Conference. And they had a lot of different speakers who talked about different ways that agencies and marketers in general, in-house marketers, could use AI. And there were a lot of different use cases. In fact, I went to a workshop on the first day and they talked about like how to develop use cases for your business, figuring out what are some ways in which AI can be used. Because I know there's a lot of hubbub, and I belong to a lot of emails now that talk about AI, and there's always like, oh, one-click landing pages, one-click personas, one-click websites. And it sounds magical, but this is like no different than some of those, build your own websites. I'm never going to worry about somebody building their own website on Wix. I'm glad that they can do it, but it's never going to compete with a website that you or I could create for somebody, because we understand everything that needs to go on behind it for it to be found and for it to convert. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for agencies to use AI, but maybe not in the way that we envision or even fear that people may be leveraging AI.
Yeah, it's like we use ChatGPT. Like most of my employees have an account assigned to them, depending on what their job role is, right? But the fear has been that it will replace jobs, and it's not. That fear has really been overblown. I do think it makes potentially as many positions as you might have in a company not necessary. So you might have 5 people that do this particular job, and now you need 3 of them, because it does make for a lot more efficiency, but it is still an assistant. It is not, something that replaces. Like, I always use the example of, yes, can it code a website? Sure. Do you know what to do with the code when it's done?
Right.
If you don't know what to do, if you're a coder, what to do. And so, we've been teaching our employees that it's, I say it's an assistant. Should it be designing an entire website? No, because there's a certain amount of creativity behind the work that the person is putting in that's actually doing the design. Can it assist with some of that design? Certainly.
Absolutely.
Depending on what you need.
And that's a very similar message, Cash, to what I've told my team too. Like, we're not laying people off because of this, but Paul Raitzer, who is in charge of Macon, said, AI won't take away jobs from marketers, but marketers who use AI will take away jobs from those who don't. And I think that is very important. And the bottom line is, will there be jobs lost? Of course there will, because with every technological advancement since the dawn of time, that's what's happened. But those technological advancements also create new jobs as well. So those are the things we need to think about. And when I told my team, I'm like, look, our competitors are going to start using these tools if they haven't already. We need to be ahead of them. I want you to feel very comfortable using these tools. And my designer, who loves to design things, himself, originally scoffed at the idea of AI helping him. And I showed him like a quick prompt that would generate like 4 different landing pages. And I'm like, obviously, we would never show any of these to the client. But if you're staring at a blank page and you need to ideate really quickly, this is a great way to get those creative juices flowing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. We do this similar things with logo design,
Right.
because it's the creative juices. No, they're not meant for the client. But if you're stuck on ideas, to the same thing as if you're writing a blog post, you can use it to help generate ideas, and it can help you with the post. But it's not meant to write the whole thing for you, because it's not good at tone and stuff. There's certain things that it's not really good. With designers, I point out to them, I'm like, use it for certain things. If you wanted to change an image because you want to make it look like a sketch, because you can load the image, have it change so you have to still choose the image. It's able to sketch it out. Something that if you were to try to do would take ridiculous amounts of time. So you can make your design way more creative than you otherwise would be able to do. Icons are an example I always use, because you're going to go to an icon library to figure out what icons, go with the design. And there's a zillion icons. You're still getting them somewhere. Right. You might do them from scratch, but even if you do that, you're probably going to look up in a library, different ideas. So why can't you just do it real quick, using chat and let it generate?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the new swipe file.
Yeah. That, like I say, it's replacing other things you would have done to do this, to get the same end result. And if it can do it faster, then great, because that's what, like I say, because then you can spend more time on other areas, instead of the mundane tasks that you still know need to be done. So I think from a marketer standpoint, those are the things that every agency should be considering. What about from a business owner standpoint, though? Because how is AI going to make their lives easier?
Well, hopefully they'll have much more productive employees. But I think there's things beyond just marketing that AI can certainly help with. And even some simple things like one of my favorite AI tools right now is Fathom, which is a Zoom plugin. And I started using this for all of my podcast interviews and all of my sales calls and client calls, always with permission. But, I had an hour-long call with a client this morning, and I don't have to worry about taking notes, and I don't need to bring anybody from my team in wasting their time to take notes. I turned on Fathom. It did a full transcript of the episode, and then it gave me a very coherent summary of that conversation that was really fantastic. I mean, I basically made a few checks on what it was saying and clarified a few things, and then just shared that with the client. So for me right there, that's a huge time savings. For larger companies with big data sets, it can be really good at taking a look at those big data sets and making recommendations and helping you with some business decisions. Now, I have not done that, and we're probably too small and don't have enough data to kind of take an inward look at our client base and some of our workflows to get much out of it. So that's not how I'm using it. But again, it's some sort of Swiss Army knife, right? That can be it could be different things to different people, and so I think owners should look at it like, could you take your financials from last year, plug them into a tool, perhaps not ChatGPT, perhaps another specialized tool, and help you forecast for the coming year? So there are ways that we can use it in different aspects of our business to create SOPs more quickly and other elements like that as well.
Yeah, I've used it to write up like terms and stuff for things, because if you, like say, anything with AI is about the prompts, but if you give it the right prompts, it's able to put together even basic legal language that you might need for agreements and stuff, at least simple ones that you would probably download anyway, because you needed a template of some sort as a start point. So it can do a lot of those, particular things, and it's, it becomes this huge time saver, just across the board for whatever the job role might be. What are some of the other things that you, since you went to the conference and stuff, just, where do they see it going? Where do you see it going? Like, what's the future look like 6 months from now? Because that's probably all we need, right?
Right, exactly. Well, you bring up a good point, Cash, because one of the recurring themes of the conference was we're going to look back on the tools of today that seem almost magical and say, wasn't it quaint back then? And back then might only be 3 months in the future, right? Because that's how quickly things are moving. One of the other recurring themes was the fact that you cannot expect the AI to work on its own. Like, there still needs to be human intervention, because ChatGPT, other LLMs, and really a lot of other AI tools like to hallucinate. That's the official term now for when it makes up lies, right? So you need to have, there have been a lot of good stories about how AI is catching carcinogens in X-rays faster than humans can, right? Or more accurately than human can. But it still takes a human to take a look at that red flag and say, yeah, that actually is a cancer spot, or it's not. And so there's a lot of different ways to use AI, but I think there still needs to be that human person involved. And another example, and one that was used quite a bit at the conference, was the idea of creating personas using ChatGPT and other LLMs and describing your ideal client. And then it basically coming back to you and saying, and I did this for one of our clients, who are, where do they get their information? Who are the influencers they follow? What are their main concerns? What keeps them from making a buying decision? Now, this goes back to the old garbage in, garbage out. If you don't really know your persona and you try and create one with one of these tools and you get back this information, you may be wildly off the mark. So you still have to do the homework of interviewing your honest to goodness real live clients, but then you can use that to inform the persona that ChatGPT or one of these other tools can help you create. And then you can literally just sit there and ask questions of it and just say, like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or how do you make a buying decision? And of course, it's just a persona. It's not a real person, but it can help you start to think about, how do I write this article that addresses the needs of this particular architect or school teacher or whoever your ideal client might be?
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of movies and stuff. We get so caught up in what Hollywood might have portrayed AI to eventually be, right? They say it's is it Skynet or something like that? And no, it's not, because it needs the human input, regardless of what you are doing with it, because it's what you're putting into it to get the output side, but also what it gives you. Like I've seen this, like if you ask it to create any like list of questions or whatnot, if you don't give it the correct instructions, it just spits back to you the same question, like 5 different ways to say it,
Right.
to ask it. So you can end up with that kind of stuff. So you have to really pay attention, to what you're putting in, but also what it's giving back to you and stuff. And don't take it, like as being like, yeah, it's perfect exactly the way it is. You've got to take the time to read it.
You've got to check the work. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a certain vanilla flavor to a lot of these tools. And
Yes.
by that, I just mean that they're purposefully meant to be neutral. And, your brand voice may not be neutral. And yes, you can say my brand is X, Y, and Z and have it spit out content that's more in your writing style.
Yeah.
But I still think you need to go over it. And my dad is a well-known clinical psychologist, and he's written a lot. And I asked ChatGPT to identify his writing style, and it did a very good job of it. And then I asked it to write in his voice on resilience is one of his topics, resilience and economic uncertainty. And it wrote 500 words that literally I could almost hear my dad's voice. Like he was pretty spot on. But I'm sure if my dad read through that, and he did, I sent it to him, he wouldn't write it quite that way. So I think we still need to spend time. But I think if we look at AI, you said as an assistant, I've also heard like an intern, very energetic, full of great ideas, but at the same time, really not a lot of life experience.
Yeah.
If we can take that and use it to help us do our jobs, I think we'll be light years ahead of the people who don't use AI to help them with their jobs.
Yeah. And that's in business in general, because if you're not, like I say, there's so many things that can be doing for you. Like I say, as marketers, there's all sorts of things, but in business, you're going to have different things where it can help, across the board. But it's like you said, like how one of those, you talked about earlier about, it might eliminate jobs, but also create jobs. I see like prompt engineering is becoming a job already,
Right.
of being able to write the prompts to make the job easier. I don't know about you, but we've been building a list of different prompts that help people within our organization to be able to have the right input, especially if they're tasks that are repeated.
Absolutely. And that can help with brand voice consistency as well.
Yeah.
And it can also just help with productivity. But there's so many aspects of AI. I mean, we haven't even really talked about like image recognition. And so I'm doing a presentation on AI in a few weeks to a group of sawmill owners. And you might think, oh, those guys must be
owners
completely insulated by artificial intelligence. Like, how would this even affect them? And it turns out some of these bigger sawmills are already using AI. And the way that lumber works is they've always had humans go in there, take a look at the wood, and then give it a grade. That's called grading lumber. Well, now they've got 4 cameras mounted up, and the wood goes through these 4 cameras so it can see all 4 sides instantaneously and then grade it because of the software that's written into it. The image recognition looks at knots and grain and all these other things for a much more consistent grading. Now, the job of the traditional lumber grader may be going away, but the person who built the cameras and writes the software and maintains the machines, those are 3 different jobs right there that are probably safer and higher paying than the original job.
Yeah, I can see that's an interesting, example because the original job goes away. Now, also the three jobs that are created, they may not, there may not be as many actual jobs. It seems like you're trading one for and adding three. You are, but you're not because that once that mill is set up, it may not have you may need the operator for the cameras. Yeah, you
Sure.
have to have one person. So the person that was grading might become your operator if you can train them up to that level. But the other ones could end up going around to other sawmills and helping them set up the same, kind of operation and whatnot for them, which of course would take time. So, it's a different type of, productivity, from that standpoint. But so that's the thing with any new technology that we've ever developed as a society and such. Like I say, at one time there was, companies that made buggies, and then eventually, they were replaced by companies making cars.
Right.
So that's what happens, but you lose one to gain in the other. So with you know the stuff that's more closer on the horizon though, where else do you think, because we've seen AI be able to help a number of ways here. Everybody thinks of chat, okay, but Google is, they're working on Bard, which is going to influence search results. You have AI that is it's able to put together video, in some
Yes.
cases. They've got ones that are doing like essentially real life avatars that are not real, for like I say, video spokespeople and stuff
Right.
like that. You've got, ones that are helping with, in our case, design, because, there's one that does, an AI for that specifically. What else do you think it could end up affecting?
I don't think that there's a part of our industry that it's not going to touch because, I mean, what do? We do a lot of design and content creation. And that's things that we've seen that AI, if it can't do itself, it can at least support us in those tasks. So there's going to be that. Today I was playing around with a chat GPT powered chatbot that can go on your website and will basically, scour all the content on your website and be able to provide answers to the site visitors. So that's one thing I saw. Now, I personally love putting together my own slide decks. That's something I'll never give up. But I did see a tool where you just enter some prompts and it's going to create really attractive, if not generic, looking slide decks for you based on the topics that you're doing. So those are going to be some things as well. I mean, you can have different AI basically respond to RFPs automatically for you, putting it in that annoying, unique format that only that one company sending out the RFP seems to want, and when they even specify the fonts. I may be a little bitter on that one, but, so I don't think there's anything that there won't be a role for. And I don't think that there's any tools that we won't be able to have somebody create. When ChatGPT first came upon the scene and I discovered it myself and started playing around with it, one of the first ideas I had was to interview it on my podcast. So I basically plugged in the questions and had ChatGPT respond to me. And I was originally going to first put on a fake voice to speak for ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then I thought of bringing in somebody who would read it. And then I found a text to voice AI tool that will take your written word and speak it. And it actually does it really well. And so I ended up grabbing one of those voices. I bought like a month-long license for it and had it respond to all of the questions for ChatGPT. And it became this very interactive podcast that some people were like, I thought you had hired a real person to do it. So, I mean, those are just some of the use cases. You mentioned, unfortunately, sometimes used for deep fake, but there can be video avatars that are created.
Yeah.
That could be a spokesperson, or, if you don't like getting on camera, you could just basically have it run with your script and even your voice, if you like your voice, but not if you've got a face for radio, as they say. So there's a lot of different ways in which we might be able to implement it. I think we just need to make sure that we always keep the humans in mind, and just that at the end of the day, most of us would prefer to interact with a human. Now, there's times when we may want to interact with like a bot just because we want to get something done quickly.
Yeah.
But for a lot of service-based industries, we're always going to need that human involved.
Okay, so that leads me to like misconceptions. Yeah, because there are a bunch, out there. So could you debunk some of the things that have been popping up, in that realm.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and we've kind of touched upon it, is just the idea of like one-click solutions. And I think that that's people who take the first version of any output from a prompt are going to be putting out the most vanilla, mediocre content that does not serve their audiences. So I think that's part of it. I think overall job loss is a myth. I do think actually there's going to be a lot of job creation, but your job might be lost. To
Yeah.
prevent that from happening, you need to figure out how you can use AI to really make yourself very employable. I think that there are some real concerns around AI for small businesses. Like when you put content up to ChatGPT or open source things, you need to be concerned about, am I sharing client information that shouldn't be shared, or am I sharing company information that shouldn't be shared? So, I mean, that's a real concern that I have. And then there's the big things about, Skynet. And I'm like, I'm not saying those things can happen, but there's nothing I can personally do about it. So I'm just going to focus on the productivity side of things and the ideation side of things. I think that's where we're going to see the biggest bang for our bucks.
Yeah, it's so talk about a minute, like if a business is going to use AI, and they're going to say, okay, like we're going to make this a part, how should they be going about it?
That's a great question. And so I actually got this directly from Macon and I brought it to my company. So like I came back and I was excited, and I'm always the guy who gets excited about everything. And so my team, rolls their eyes a little bit. I'm like, no, this is for real. This is like as big as the internet, as big as computers. We need to do it. So what I told them is I said, over the next 2 weeks, I want you to write down all the repetitive tasks that you're doing that you think there might be a use case for AI. And they did that, and they brought it in an in-person staff we had recently. And we sat down and we kind of talked through it and tried to identify a few of those that we could pilot. So, here's the problem, that it takes me too long to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, great. So let's figure out a way that we might be able to use AI. And it could be a simple, broad tool like ChatGPT, or it could be a very specific tool that has one use, something more like Market Muse, which is good for SEO. But let's start playing around with these tools, see if we get the productivity uptick that we're looking for, and then decide, is this something that we want to implement throughout our company? So I think that's a great process to have. Literally just start tracking some of the repetitive, maybe drudgery filled aspects of your job. And then don't even worry if AI can solve it or not. But after you've got that list, then sit down and say, which one of these could AI help me with? Is it likely to be able to help me with? And then how much time or money am I going to save by doing it this way? And then choose just one or two, maybe at the beginning, problems to pilot and work on those. And then if they work, great, you can move on. And if they don't work, fantastic. You put them aside and you try something else.
Yeah, they say, figuring out where it can help, and then implementation too, because not everywhere it's going to, on the surface, it could seem like it's a really good idea. Yes, it could help solve this problem, or, but when you actually go to do it, I say it might be a lot more extensive than you realize, in actually making it work. So that's always an issue. And then, so let's talk, because when we first started talking, you mentioned, either get on board, or don't, but you can get left behind. So in your business and with others you've seen, do you see pushback? With, you mentioned a designer.
Right. Like, I think that some people are just like, it's a neat toy, but it's not really a tool. Or they're fearful of it. Like, that's part of the reasons behind the Hollywood strikes right now is, will AI take my job? For me personally, I wouldn't force any of my employees to use it. Like, we're pretty casual about that sort of stuff. But at the same time, if all of a sudden one of my employees is underperforming compared to everybody else, then I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with them and kind of find out what's keeping them from succeeding. And if one of the things is an aversion to AI, and I show them how AI can make them more productive or put out better work, and they're still resistant, well, then we might have to have a more difficult conversation. So for me, it's always carrot before stick. That's just my approach to everything. So I would try and show them how they can use these tools to become a more valuable member of the team and just to produce better work for our clients. And for me, my belief is that is going to convince 95% of the population. and probably 100% of the people that I bother to employ.
Yeah, because that's what I've seen is like you either, you get pushback because you're actively trying to, get people to use it, and they just want to be naturally resistant to the idea, especially if they feel like their job might be in jeopardy. Whereas I'm getting you to embrace it so you're better at your job, but they're looking at it as it's, can replace. And I'm like, well, somebody has to actually work with it.
Right.
It can't do this on its own. And then you also have people that, in what I've seen, is that they're just lazy about it. And that's not like, it's not active pushback against the idea. It's more so, I don't want to take the time to learn it, because I'm comfortable doing things the way I do them.
Right.
And they don't necessarily have the fear of being replaced. Like I say, because they know, based on what they do, they know it couldn't do it anyway. At least they've heard enough about it to say, yeah, that's not going to be able to, do what I do, but it could still improve productivity. So that's what I've often seen is, like I say, just
Right.
general laziness about it.
And I have a director of operations who's my exact opposite, because I'm like, everything's great and we're going to try all these things. It'll be wonderful. And she's like, how are we going to budget time in the schedule for this? How are we going to decide what is our SOP? How are we going to decide which tools we're going to purchase? All excellent questions that I would never think of. So it's good to have somebody on your team like that who will push back. And then all of a sudden you have to develop a plan for what will we pilot? What is going to be our budget for new AI software that we can see? Will this become a part of our company? So I think it's good to have somebody like that on the team. They're not necessarily negative. You may feel they're negative if you're really exuberant about AI, but they're not necessarily negative, but they keep you in check and they make sure that you're just not looking at the next shiny object, but really thinking about this as a legitimate business tool that could increase your productivity, bring down costs, and free up your team to do their best, most creative work possible.
Yeah. One of the things that we did on our team is we basically have a chat expert now, somebody that's tech savvy already, very enthusiastic about these kinds of tools and stuff. And he did all of the homework. And what he ends up doing is working with individual staff members to see, what help they need and kind of how they do their job. And he'll often write the prompts, that they need, and teach them how to use those prompts and then make modifications on their own and such, based on, the specific task that's needed. Because if you have, especially if it's a repetitive task, but there's always something, like if you're writing website content or something, there's always something that's going to change about it. And so how do you modify the prompt to be able to get what you need? Or, if it's a design thing, whatever it might be. So you have an advocate on the staff that can help them learn, stuff like this and show the benefits. Because often, like I say, if you just say, hey, I want you to use it, go learn it. Well, like you mentioned of your opposite, that she would say, well, how are we going to budget the time and everything? And it's like, well, what I'm doing is I'm budgeting this person's time. And then that way, each individual needs to give up less time to be able to learn this, because we don't need them to learn from scratch. We need them to learn from this other person that's going to help them do it much quicker. And I've always seen, like, or found, you got to have somebody that's an advocate for these kinds of things too. And sometimes it's best that it's not the business owner. Of course, they can be an advocate, but if you're trying to sell it, to a staffer, do it with another staffer, in this kind of a situation, because they don't feel like it's rammed down their throat as much. Like, we know this will make you better.
Right.
Use it. No, you've got to get buy-in on these things. And so, you get an early adopter that really wants to learn everything, that can make a big difference.
Absolutely. I think that's true with everything, but the less they feel like it's being pushed upon them, and the more that they see that it can be a gift or a tool that they can use to enhance what they're doing, I think the easier the buy-in will be.
Yeah. So do you have any last thoughts to sum up, AI in general, of how it's going to, how it affects marketing, how it affects businesses?
Well, I would just say to anybody who's listening who hasn't really hasn't dived into this yet, is that it's time to do this. And the bottom line is, your competitors are probably already doing this. You do not want to be left behind. I would at least start exploring and start spending some time with a large language model like ChatGPT, an image creator like Midjourney,
Yeah.
and start playing around with these tools and seeing what they're capable of. And there's also a lot of great resources online. I know that the Macon conference has the company that puts it on has a lot of resources, and there's ways to follow certain trends on LinkedIn and stuff like that. I would try and wrap your head around this as quickly as possible, because I really do think it's going to be a revolution that's at least as big as the internet for marketing agencies. So I think that we need to stay on top of it and don't get left behind.
Yeah, we're actually, amazingly enough, approaching the 1 year mark since the introduction of Chat GPT, and it's like, wow, and I know they've already gone through multiple iterations,
Right.
and version advancements and such, so like I say, it's a constantly evolving landscape, and if you get left behind, and like I say, it's not just our type of business, it's any business in general, you can get really left behind, and there are others that are going to take advantage of it, and it's, eventually you'll feel the impact.
It'll also be interesting to see what our clients think about us using it. We've had some discussions in my mastermind about this. Is it something you want to promote? In other words, are people going to be looking for marketing agencies that are leveraging AI, or are they going to think that marketing agencies that use AI are cutting corners and should be charging less? So it's an interesting conundrum. We're not actively talking. I mean, I talk a lot
Yeah.
about AI, but we're not talking about how we use it quite yet, because we're still figuring out how we use it. We wouldn't shy away from it, but we always say
Yeah.
we use it as an assist to make our marketers and our quality of product even better.
Yeah, that's the approach we're taking too. It's an assistant, it's not replacing anything. Yeah. Well, Rich, it's been great to have you on. How would people get a hold of you?
Well, if people like podcasts, and I'm guessing they do, they could always check out the Agents of Change podcast that's delivered every week, all about digital marketing. I'm the Rich Brooks on just about every social platform, but I'm most responsive on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me and just let me know that you heard me on the Marketing Masters Agency Power Show, and be happy to connect with y'all.
And this has been another great episode. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Cash Miller, and the CEO of Titan Digital. And I hope you got something out of this. Tune into the next episode. Thank you for joining us.